Hello digital world, and welcome back to another episode of Spliced In Later. I hope you all are keeping well out there in that very wide and wonderful world. No movie review for you today, but hopefully next week. Here in Australia, things are starting to open up everywhere, and I'm very excited for the fact that I will hopefully be able to see the new Marvel Cinematic Universe film Eternals next week, which is one of my most anticipated films of this entire year. So the anticipation is growing for that. But why not do another Marvel thing this week? Why not? Let's do something different. Let's talk about something Marvel. Haha, not really. No, this is we're continuing our ongoing series of checking in on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as I've mentioned many times in many different countdowns, in many different reviews, many different references. I'm a huge fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, mainly from the wide range of types of movies and themes, the characters, the actors who portray them, but mainly just the MCU's ability to completely create a cinematic universe with all these different franchises and all these different characters that go off into their own worlds to do their own movies and adventures, and then every now and then will interact with each other in a seamless way. So if you're following these movies one after the other, you get the joy of seeing this happen. Or if you just pop into a movie and you haven't seen any of the others, you still know absolutely what's going on, which is just fantastic. And as we get further and further into the back half of 2021 and the start of 2022, this universe is expanding extremely fast. It's hard to keep up with sometimes, but somehow it still is managing to keep its footing. It is an interesting time, obviously, with the Infinity Saga over. There's still an uncertainty as to where everything's going, but for the most part, the content that they're providing is still pretty great. After the lack of MCU products in 2020, thanks to the wonderful pandemic that continues to bless us every day, this year has been the complete opposite, with the most MCU products that have been released, thanks to the expansion onto Disney Plus and their either limited series or their seasons. It's expanding into animation or into new worlds and new stories and new characters with the new movies that came out this year, origin stories for Shang-Chi, or as I said, the Eternals coming. So this franchise, this series that I'm doing, mixes itself up a lot. When we began, we were just going to go through each individual property one at a time and just talk about it, give a bit of look back on its history, how the movie was, how it's been reflected on later in life, all of that stuff, while at the same time reviewing the new MCU stuff that has been coming out quite frequently while this podcast has been on. So to give you a recap so far, in terms of in the histories gone by, we have talked about Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, and Thor. And in terms of the new stuff this year, oh boy, we've looked into WandaVision, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, Black Widow, What If, and Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. So we are going back in time again today, all the way back to 2011, and we are going to look into the origin story of one of the most popular and powerful and wonderful characters of the MCU, one of the forefronters, second banana only to Iron Man, really. We are looking at Captain America's origin story in 2011 called Captain America, the First Avenger. Why it couldn't just be called Captain America, I'll never know. The stories are different depending who you talk to. Some say, oh, they had to call it the First Avenger to sell it in other countries that aren't particular fans of America. I think, nah, I think really it's at that point where the MCU and Marvel and Disney and everyone behind it were going, the Avengers movie is coming. We really want this to work. So we're going to remind everybody that there's Avengers coming by popping this little parentheses tagline on Captain America's first film. But irrelevant to the point, as it's almost, oh my god, it's over 10 years since this film came out. It came out in July 2011. We've just passed that point. So 10 years ago, we got our first look at Chris Evans as Captain America and who he was. It's not his first cinematic appearance. He's been in some other movies before, which either, depending on what you think of them, they're either trash or entertainingly lovably bad. And I think I'm in the latter for at least one of them. But enough about that. Let's look back and have a chat about Captain America, the First Avenger. Now, as I said, Captain America, he's one of the big four: Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, and Captain America. Back in the early 2010s, or the late 2000s, whatever, when they Iron Man's success, the success of putting Tony in for a brief cameo in The Incredible Hulk, things were starting to ramp up, going, what if we could take all these different characters and put them all together into a movie? Now, I don't know. I do think that Marvel and Disney have worked out a very good idea and a good formula for their cinematic universe in terms of introducing a character, letting us know who they are, letting them know about their world before bringing them all together. Unlike the DC world, which rushed headfirst into throwing Batman and Superman facing off against each other and then throwing all the Justice League members into one film before anybody had any idea who these people were. But a jaded person might also say, well, Iron Man made a ton of money. Why don't we just make extra movies so we can get some extra money on top of that? That's my jaded opinion that has only recently come up in the last couple of weeks. I do not want to be that guy that goes, oh, they had this all worked out completely from the get-go. You look back at this old stuff and you can tell that it was absolutely not planned out in terms of the Incredible Hulk's formula and feel, and Edward Norton as Bruce being completely different to what the Hulk eventually became. Or Chris Hemsworth's Thor. Originally he was lordly and Shakespearean and a conflicted prince. And now he's the Big Lebowski in Asgardian god stuff. So the idea that right from the get-go they went, this is this character and this is who they're going to be, we have the plan, is not always correct. Except for two certain cases. Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, those two people, Robert Downey Jr. the man and Tony Stark the character, essentially merged into one and became the iconic character that we know. But right next to him is Chris Evans as Captain America. Back in the day when they announced that Chris Evans was going to play Steve Rogers, aka Captain America, my very young and foolish self didn't think that that was the right idea, or I couldn't see it in my mind. Now, again, this is back in the early days. I didn't know much about Marvel at all, aside from Spider-Man and the X-Men. They were my most well-known things, mainly due to the movies, and because those were the comics that had been handed down to me when I was a kid. So I knew all about the Spider-Man world and I knew all about the X-Men world, or as much as you can being a young kid. Captain America was that character, like Iron Man, like Hulk, like Thor, that would appear on Marvel posters, or you'd see him on lunchboxes and things like that. But for me, he was just the guy with the shield. I knew nothing about him. So when I asked people about Captain America, the response to him was not unenthusiastic, but he was the boring superhero, the all for one for all American patriot. We got to do the right thing all the time. So there's not much to my personality or character. It's just America first, lead the charge, win the fight today, that sort of thing. And then they went, okay, Chris Evans is playing that type of character. And I knew Chris Evans from the Fantastic Four and Scott Pilgrim versus the World and The Losers, where Chris Evans would always play the schlubby jock, pretty but dumb, smart ass, smarmy, doesn't play by the rules, that sort of character. So I looked at that actor and the roles he had played, and I looked at what I had heard about Captain America and what Captain America means as an individual and to patriotism and all of that. And I had trouble really thinking that the two of them would merge together. Looking back on it now, I cannot see anyone else other than Chris Evans playing Captain America. He seamlessly became that character in the portrayal of Steve Rogers, but at the same time, he made it into a likable and relatable character that people were able to latch onto. So now people don't go, Captain America, he's the boring, goody two-shoes superhero. Now they go, Captain America is the badass with the shield, the leader, the one who will find hope where there is none. People love Captain America now. Maybe they did in the past. I don't know about Marvel in the early days, what people thought about them. But in terms of a general pop culture thing now, Captain America is looked up to with such high regard, just like Iron Man. And it all began relatively back in the 2011 First Avenger movie, but certainly once he was jumped in with the Avengers and then proceeded on to the much better and can't wait to talk about soon, Captain America, the Winter Soldier. A brief update or recap of the First Avenger if you, for some reason, have not seen it and are just listening to these episodes because you want to hear me talk about something you've never seen before. Captain America, the First Avenger is Captain America's origin story. Steve Rogers lives in 1940s World War II era time. He is a scrawny kid back in those early CGI days when they made Chris Evans look small and tiny, and there's an uncanny valley essence to it, which is a bit creepy. But he wants to serve his country, of course. He wants to fight the Nazis. He wants to protect people He's been bullied all his life, so he wants to stand up for the little guy, to make a difference, to do what's right. Everywhere rejects him because a breeze will knock him over. But he impresses one German scientist who has been brought over to America, and he has stolen a super soldier serum that he originally created for the Nazis, specifically for a faction known as Hydra, led by Johann Schmidt, played by Hugo Weaving, also known as the Red Skull. After he took a bit of that formula himself, which wasn't quite ready yet, he had a Red Skull morph onto his body. He's also super strong and all that, but he's basically just the face of pure evil. So now this Dr. Erskine, he's here with America. They want to make their own super soldier. They've got all these potential recruits. They're all tough, patriotic bullies, essentially. But the Dr. Erskine looks at Steve and goes, that's what I want. Not someone who's tough and powerful, but someone who has a good heart, who's pure, who looks up, who wants to stand up for other people and all that. That's who I want. And I'm the Doctor, so I decide. Steve gets the formula, transforms into Captain America, tough, all of that stuff. And then what follows essentially is a war film and his adventures fighting Hydra and trying to stop the Red Skull and proving to people around him that he is not just a super strong guy now or just whatever, but he is a good person and someone that people can look up to, someone that people will follow, align themselves to. He inspires America. He becomes the symbol for patriotism. That is what I know of Captain America from my early days of comic books and stuff. Does some adventures, fights some Hydra people, flings his super shield, his special shield full of vibranium designed by Tony's father, Howard Stark, eventually leading to a final confrontation with the Red Skull, which moves all the pieces into place for Captain America to eventually come to the present and play in the sandbox with the rest of the Avengers. That's not necessarily a spoil because this movie is 10 years old, and if you know anything about movie pop culture in the Marvel world, you know that Captain America can't stay in World War II forever, so he must come to the future in some way or another. Now, I really liked this film. I loved it a lot when I first saw it, and I have rewatched it a few times now, and it deserves recognition, I think. I don't know if people didn't think much about it in the beginning. I think it was initially perceived as a run-of-the-mill superhero origin story. Not terrible, not great, just succeeds in its goal of introducing Captain America as a character before throwing him into the Avengers. But I really like the formula of the film and what it does to establish Captain America as a superhero, but it's also unique in that it sets it in the World War II setting. So there's a lot more going on besides just superhero has to save the day. It's in a World War II setting. You've got Allies versus Axis. You've got the Hydra Piff Stompers coming to smash the villains. You've got Captain America teaming up with his own special squad of Howling Commandos. The science isn't quite up to date with what we've got for the present, so you see it's fun watching Howard Stark try to design gadgets and ideas that will work in World War II time. It's a reminiscent of those war films, of those pulp adventure films, and I think looking at what other origin films have become, for instance, say Captain Marvel or Ant-Man, they're good films too, but they do a lot of the same. We've got to introduce our hero, but what do we do about that's different? Or I guess they can do this and that, but they have to tick off these plot points that all origin movies have to have to get to the end of the film. Captain America is unique in that no other origin film is set during World War II. It does not have the parameters in place that influence things to go a certain way. The way that the American people behave, the way that the Nazis behave, the atmosphere of the world itself is so different. And because obviously we had to get Captain America to the present to play with the Avengers, it's isolated and unique on its own in that there can obviously not be a sequel to that because we're in the present now. So it's a fresh breath of fresh air. It's a unique direction that the MCU takes in the early days before pivoting back to where it's going. It's a lot of fun. It's not like a dark, bleak thing. It is very optimistic and hopeful, led solely by great charismatic performances and a wonderful direction, which I'll get to in a moment. But it is definitely one of my favorite MCU films, and I think more and more people are starting to realize that looking back on it. As I said, I gushed about Chris Evans in the beginning, but he is fantastic as Captain America. He is patriotic as hell, but he's extremely likable too. He's able to make quips and funny jokes. He's not just plain boring vanilla, and he is loyal to the people around him. Aside from him, They've got a wonderful array of characters that are introduced. Unfortunately, not too many of them get to do much more later on in the films because obviously World War II times, not everybody gets to go to the future with Captain America. They have his love interest, Peggy Carter, who, that's the one fault I find in that the movie spends a lot of time telling you that Steve and Peggy love each other, but I don't think they show it enough. I think you just tell you, okay, they're in love now. The relationship has grown since this movie. So the way that they've behaved and talked about each other in other products, whether it's the Agent Carter TV show or Captain America the Winter Soldier or even the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, they've built on that relationship they had, that lost lovers thing. But for this movie just as a whole, they don't have that yet already. So I find that a little difficult to follow or believe. But that is just a very small nitpick in an otherwise grand relationship that they have with each other. We've also got Steve's best friend, Bucky. Bucky is everything Steve wants to be in terms of tough, charming, strong. They have a very ride or die relationship with each other, which is fantastic. And Sebastian Stan is a really great actor and plays Bucky really well. Aside from that, Hugo Weaving hamming it up as his German Red Skull. It's unfortunate that he has never really come back to embrace that role again, but he's definitely a very fun villain to watch. He's perfect for what I would imagine the Red Skull to be. And you've got Tommy Lee Jones as gruff Captain Colonel Phillips leading the Super Soldier program, Stanley Tucci as Dr. Erskine, who gives Steve the Super Soldier serum, the Howling Commandos, Toby Jones is a creepy scientist, Dr. Zola, and Dominic Cooper as a young Howard Stark, who is basically Tony Stark, but his father, really. They have the same vibe, the same attitude to life, the same playboy attitude, but the unique thing for Howard is that it is a playboy attitude in World War II times. As I said, the concept of World War II is unique, and I really like the direction of this film. This film is directed by Joe Johnston. If you are unfamiliar with that director, I have another film that I would highly recommend for you to see if you haven't seen it. It's called The Rocketeer, and The Rocketeer is most likely the reason that Joe Johnston was picked to direct Captain America the First Avenger. The Rocketeer is a very old 1990s B-movie type film about a young pilot set during World War II who discovers a jetpack and uses that jetpack to become a super vigilante hero, sorta, called the Rocketeer. And he flies around with his rocket trying to help people out. And Timothy Dalton is this secret Hollywood-style villain, swashbuckling, mustache twirling. But the Rocketeer is unique because while it's doing all that, it's in World War II times. So you've got the mafia, you've got the impending doom of America not yet to join World War, who don't really realize that the Nazis are a thing they should worry about yet. Filming old Hollywood films like The Adventures of Robin Hood and how that production was done and the different schedule, and just the fun of watching the Rocketeer slowly become a hero. A lot of that was placed into Captain America the First Avenger, and it's Joe Johnston's whimsicalness, I think, his wonder at people discovering their powers, the World War II setting, all of that stuff, which really works. The Rocketeer is a bit better than the First Avenger just in terms of showing a character learning how to use their skills and their techniques. Captain America, unfortunately, there is a bit of a montage which sort of blurs past him getting used to his super soldier powers. There's a few montages just to get Steve from one point to another, which is unfortunate. But for the most part, it is a wonderfully directed World War II film with a lot of magic and wonder. So even though it's World War II, you're going to get depressed or sad or whatever. It's just a unique concept that still fills you with joy when the music swells and the Allies save the day and Cap punches out Hitler or a Hitler betrayer again and again and again. And then, of course, I can't really talk about this film too much without addressing the ending, which is really that Steve does a heroic sacrifice to save Peggy and the world from the Red Skull's villainous plans involving the Tesseract, a special cube of infinite power, which in those early days, we didn't know what it was or where he got it, except that supposedly it had come from Asgard or whatever. But these are the early days when the Infinity Stones were slowly being seeded into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Whether they knew that the Tesseract was going to be an Infinity Stone in these early days, I cannot say for certain. It's entirely possible, but I feel like it was just a MacGuffin back then, and it wasn't until the Avengers and later things where they went, what if we introduced the Infinity Stones, and what if that Tesseract was one of them? Anyway, Tesseract and Steve both end up in the present through a heroic sacrifice where Steve gets awoken. Nick Fury, Sam Jackson's there to go, welcome to the Avengers, essentially. It is a sudden, jarring end to the movie. I don't feel like the movie finishes naturally because it's just trying to get Cap from 1945 to 2012. But knowing where Cap went after that, and that really this is just the beginning of his journey, both as a superhero, but also as a team player in the Avengers, as his own man, his own belief system, not just blindly following governments or rules or anything like that. It's a first step in an otherwise largely perfect character arc for the Captain America character. So yeah, that's it. I love Captain America: The First Avenger, as I've just said, or just Captain America. I love rewatching it when I go through my MCU rewatches. I think Chris Evans nailed it when I didn't expect him to, and has made Captain America his own character. Thinking of anyone else playing Steve Rogers after Chris Evans is really hard to do. Same with Tony Stark and Robert Downey Jr. And just making Captain America not just likable and relatable to people, but one of the most popular Marvel characters in cinema of all time. Impressive. Mainly due to Chris Evans, mainly due to Joe Johnston directing this, to a great World War II origin story and a sneak peek at the last major character before they all got to play together in the upcoming film, The Avengers. There you are. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed. I do love talking about this MCU stuff, and I hope you enjoy listening about it because I've got several more of these to get through over the coming months and years. So look forward to that. As I said, I will be back next week at the very least to review Eternals, but maybe I will give you a little episode earlier in the week before. It really depends how I feel, and that can really fluctuate depending on what's going on in the world. So you just have to wait and see, but there will be at least something next week. I promise you that. Until then, I love and appreciate you as always. Stay safe, stay kind to each other, and keep on keeping on. You've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.